Chapter 9 Sunhee. It wasn't easy to think of a plan when I didn't even know what the problem was. Uncle was doing something that 아버지 didn't like, so should a plan be to try to stop what Uncle was doing? Or to help him do whatever it was, and then get 아버지 to agree that it was a good thing? At least I knew what the first step was. I needed to find out exactly what Uncle was doing. So I started stopping by the shop on my way home from school. I didn't think Uncle would suspect anything. I'd always gone to his shop at least once every few weeks. If he wasn't too busy, we had fun together. He'd print fake newspapers with my name in them, like the time I'd been named class leader, Kim Sun-hee, appointed to important post. That's what the headline had said. Of course, I couldn't keep the papers because he always used my Korean name, so I'd look at them for a while and then burn them. It was odd, but whenever I had one of those pretend newspapers in the house, my hearing seemed to get better. I was always hearing footsteps in the lane, footsteps that sounded like Japanese guards. The first time I went to Uncle's shop on my mission, it was a bright autumn day. My friend Jeong-shin came with me. Jeong-shin's family had moved to town some months earlier, and we'd become friends almost right away. I liked her on sight because she had the same kind of smile behind her eyes that Uncle did. We had a lot in common. We were both the youngest in our families. She had an older sister, Hee-won. Both of us liked to read and enjoyed learning kanji. We were exactly the same height, and her Japanese name was Keiko, which was very similar to Keoko. Jeong-shin was teaching me to play cat's cradle. Every day, she brought a long piece of string to school. She'd tie the ends of the string together and put her hands into the loop. Then she cleverly wrapped and pulled the string with her fingers until it looked like a gate with crossed bars. She showed me how to transfer the string from her hands to mine in another pattern. We passed the string back and forth. Jeong-shin seemed to know dozens of ways to make new patterns with it. I made up little stories to go with the passing of the string and would say them aloud. A girl opens the gate, the crossed bars, and she comes to a road, a string in 4 neat straight lines. The road goes over a bridge, crossbars like the gates, only upside down, on which a spider has woven its web. This was my favorite pattern. It was intricate but perfectly symmetrical and really did look like a spider's web. We always played cat's cradle for a few minutes after school. Sometimes Jeong-shin would come home with me. We'd do our homework together and then play more cat's cradle. Jeong-shin was better at it than I was. She played quite often with her sister, and when we played fast, it was almost always my fault when the string ended up in a tangle. We passed the string so quickly that we had to concentrate hard on making the right moves. It was always a relief to collapse in laughter when one of us made a mistake. That was how Jeong-shin's sister Hee-won usually found us, playing cat's cradle or else silly with laughter. On the days Jeong-shin was at my house, Hee-won often came by in the late afternoon to walk her home. On this particular day, I had had enough of cat's cradle and thought of something else to do. Let's go into town, I suggested. We can find the popcorn man. A few days earlier, Jeong-shin had brought me a special treat, a few pieces of duck. This sweetened rice cake was my favorite snack, and I couldn't even remember the last time I had eaten some. It took a great deal of the finest white rice to make duck. I had nibbled the slices of duck slowly, to make them last as long as possible, and Jeong-shin had seemed very pleased at my appreciation. Now it was my turn to treat her. I went to the kitchen shelves and asked 어머니 for some popping corn. There wasn't much left in the little bag. I took nearly all of it and put it in a hollow gourd. Then I fetched 2 pennies from my savings box and put them in my coin purse. I also brought along an empty grain sack. On fine days, the popcorn man roamed the streets of our town, wheeling a little cart. He sold corn, or for 2 cents he would pop the corn you brought him. We found him a few blocks away and gave him a gourd of corn. The popping was always fun to watch. He poured the dried kernels into one end of a device that looked rather like a pot-bellied cannon, which contained some kind of heating element. After a few minutes, popped corn came shooting out of the cannon's barrel and was cut in a wire mesh basket. When the popping sound stopped, the popcorn man took the basket off while I held my sack underneath so the fluffy popcorn could fall into it. 정신 and I walked along the street munching our snack. We turned a corner and I said, "My uncle's shop is on this street. Why don't we go there?" This was really what I had in mind all along. If I showed Jeongsin around the shop, I might learn something about what Uncle was doing. Jeongsin agreed eagerly. She had often heard me speak of Uncle but had never met him. When we reached the shop, Uncle greeted me with his usual cheerful smile. In return, I said, "Uncle, I would like you to meet a friend of mine. This is Park Jeongsin." Jeongsin bowed politely to Uncle and he smiled at her. I was proud to be introducing my friend. She looked so pretty with a new white collar on her uniform. "I am pleased to meet you," Uncle said. "Tell me about your family." "My father is Park Sung-jun," Jeongsin replied. "My family moved here a few months ago. My father has a new job at the bank." Uncle nodded, but the look in his eyes changed. The little lines around his eyes that made his smile so pleasant seemed to disappear. His eyes suddenly looked almost blank, expressionless, even though his mouth was still smiling. Or was I only imagining things? Then Uncle turned to me. "I'm sorry, Sonny, but I'm busy just now. You and your friend must stop by another time. Perhaps then I will be able to print something special for her." Jeongsin was delighted by his offer and thanked him politely, but I was puzzled. It was quiet in the shop. There were no customers, and Uncle was not running between the printing press and the counter and the paper storeroom. But of course, I honored his request, and we turned to leave. Uncle walked us to the door, and this, too, puzzled me. He waved to us as we walked away. I took one last glance over my shoulder and saw Uncle scanning the street carefully. I didn't know what to think. When I got home, I took my shoes off as usual, put on my straw slippers, and went to find Taeyeol in the workshop area behind the house. "I went to see Uncle just now," I said. Then I hesitated. I'd intended to tell him about Uncle's behavior with Jeongsin and how he'd look up and down the street after we left. But now it seemed silly. I didn't want Taeyeol to think I was making a big deal out of nothing. I bit my lip, then said I didn't discover anything. He sighed. "I haven't been able to find out anything either. We'll just have to keep trying. Now, don't forget, whatever you find out, don't do anything about it. Come and tell me first. We're working on this together, remember?" I nodded automatically, but I felt annoyed. He still thought I was a baby. How I wished I could simply talk to Uncle about it. But I knew this would be unfair. Asking him to talk to us about things Abuji disapproved of would be disrespectful. The weeks passed without either of us learning anything more about Uncle's activities. The mystery even slipped my mind sometimes because I had other things to think about. I would soon graduate from elementary school. In the new year, I'd start junior high school. I had passed all my examinations with good marks, but I didn't stop studying. I wanted to be ready for the more difficult junior high courses. One wintry afternoon, I was in the sitting room bent over my books when suddenly I heard shouting in the lane. It was Taeyo's voice, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I rushed to the door. "The Japanese have attacked America," he shouted breathlessly as he rushed inside. He tore off his cap as he came in, his cheeks red with cold and excitement. 아버지 and 어머니 too had come to the courtyard. 아버지 from his room, 어머니 from the kitchen. "Taeyo, calm yourself," 아버지 said. "What are you saying?" "It was on the radio. Everyone's talking about it." 아버지 frowned. "Possibly a rumor. It seems highly unlikely." Taeyo crossed the courtyard to the sitting room and turned on the radio. The transmission was static-riddled and somewhat garbled, but we could still make out some words. "Spectacular victory, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, important military base. Enemy completely taken by surprise. Heavy damage." While 아버지 and Taeyo crouched by the radio, I stood to one side and whispered translations to 어머니. After several minutes, 아버지 turned off the radio, his face grave. "It is a very serious action," he said to Taeyo. "It means Japan is at war with the United States. I fear hard times ahead." Just then, Uncle rushed in, as excited as Taeyo had been. He was waving a flyer in one hand. "You've all heard, have you? It's incredible news. Taeyo, I need your help at the shop. The military command has ordered hundreds of these flyers to be printed and distributed all over town." 아버지 held up his hand. "Surely, Taeyo, you have studying to do." Taeyo looked from uncle to 아버지 and back again. I could tell that he wanted to go with uncle, to be part of the excitement. Uncle bowed his head. "형님, I will secure permissions for Taeyo to miss school tomorrow and to make up his lessons at a later date. This is very important work. Everyone must know the details of this event. His help is sorely needed." 아버지 pursed his lips for a moment, then finally nodded at Taeyo. "See that you work twice as hard on your studies tonight," he said. Taeyo bowed hastily. "Yes, 아버지. Thank you, 아버지." He jammed his cap back on and hurried out the door with uncle. A quick flame of anger flared in me. I'd have liked to have gone with uncle as well. I could have helped stack the flyers and bind them with twine while Taeyo delivered them. Why should he have all the fun? I wandered out into the lane. My steps took me in the directions of Tomo's house. These days, Tomo and I played together less often than we used to. We weren't angry with each other or anything like that. It was just that we'd outgrown our childhood games, and I was spending more time with Jeong-shin. But Tomo and I still sometimes thought of each other when we had time to play. He was in the yard when I arrived, but so were 3 other boys I didn't know. When I saw them, I pretended I was only passing by, but Tomo caught sight of me and ran out to the lane. "Keoko, look! See what my father brought me?" He displays his new toy, a beautiful model airplane made of wood and sturdy paper. It's a flying dragon, exactly like the ones flown by the imperial pilots. He ran in a circle holding the plane over his head. "Ek, ek, 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 ek," he shouted. The dragon swoops over Pearl Harbor. He finds a target. He fires. It's a direct hit. The enemy plane crashes, smoke and flames everywhere. The nimble dragon escapes. I felt a little bashful with those other boys around, but I did want to look at the plane. "Can I see it again, Tomo?" I asked. He came to a stop before me and held the plane out. "You can hold it," he said generously. "Hey," one of the boys protested. You wouldn't let any of us even touch it. Tomo looked at him with disdain. You might be too rough with it. Keoko will be careful. I was pleased that he trusted me, but his words also made me anxious. I held the plane for only a few moments, admiring the glossy paper of its wings and the propellers that really spun. Then I gave it back to him, thinking how much Teo would like to have a plane like this one. He loved mechanical things. The Imperial forces have huge fleets of these planes. Tomo said excitedly, the Americans don't stand a chance. Egg, 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 egg. And he began running around again with his plane held high. Kill them! Kill the Americans! Another boy shouted. Kill the Americans! The others took up the chant. Kill the Americans! Kill the Americans! All of them, shouted the first boy. Even the babies? I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The boy stopped chanting and stared at me. Tomo slowed down and zoomed his plane over to me. Keoko, don't you remember the movie? He said. We've been shown a short film in our classrooms a few weeks earlier. Onishi-san had gone from room to room with the movie projector until all the students had seen the film. None of us had ever seen a movie before. The teacher helped Onishi-san hang a sheet on the wall, then instructed us as class leader to choose a few girls to help me cover the windows with heavy pieces of paper. The classroom looked different, darkened like that, almost scary. Then Onishi-san turned on the projector, and suddenly there was a picture on the sheet. A picture so bright it almost blinded me. When my eyes stopped hurting a few seconds later, I saw that the people in the picture were moving. You could even tell when they were talking, their lips moving quickly. They looked so real, it was hard to believe that if I touched them, I would only have been touching cloth. Everyone gasped and murmured in surprise. Then Onishi-san started talking. The film, he said, was to teach us what Americans were like. The pictures were of white people, usually riding horses and wearing big white hats, shooting and killing other people. Onishi-san told us that the Americans hated all people with black hair and killed even the women and babies of their enemies just to amuse themselves. At the time, I barely heard him. It hadn't mattered what the movie was about. The moving pictures themselves were what fascinated me. The rest of that day, and 4 days afterward, those flickering images kept returning to my mind, almost like a dream. Now, Onishi-san's words came back to me. It was true that all the people being shot at in the film had long black hair. But I'd heard Uncle and Abaji talk about America. I hadn't understood everything they said, but I knew that America was a very large country. There were things about it that they both admired. Education, I remembered Abaji saying, and Uncle talking about freedom. I couldn't believe that Abaji and Uncle would admire people who killed babies for fun. The boys were still staring at me. I felt my face growing red. The movie, I mumbled, just to say something, anything. Yes, one of the other boys said. If the Americans have the chance, they'll kill all of us. Because we have black hair, we have to kill them first. Tomo glanced at me quickly, then at his friends. Yes, but we won't need to kill any babies, he said. We'll kill all their soldiers, bomb their cities. They'll surrender like dogs. And he zoomed his plane over their heads. Ack, 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 ack. Tomo ran up the lane with his friends following him. I waited for a moment, hoping he'd look back at me, but he kept going. I turned the other way and walked home, feeling confused and a little sad. I was glad that Tomo didn't want to kill babies. Still, he and his friends all seemed to think that playing at killing was fun. Was it because they were boys? Even the talk about killing had made my stomach feel cold.